Hi, everybody. So, apparently the webcam's not working right now, which is probably good because I have a face for radio and I have this big wound on my face from hitting myself with a crowbar. The crowbar was completely out of line in this situation. I feel like I think I've been misrepresented with this whole thing. And so it's good because I got a big gash on my face. So it's good that the webcam is not working at this point. And I realized that we're also in this spot with all of our families where we're getting a little bit like maybe a little bit chippy when it comes to interactions. And I know this because this wound that's on my face after like 4 days, I was having a conversation with my daughter Allie, who's in seventh grade, and after me kind of taking a couple of jabs at her, she's like, yeah, Dad, why don't you come on over here a second, see if I can open that cut up back for you. So I know that things aren't going, I'm sure that things are going just as well at your place. And so here we are talking about the impact of, impacting the narrative and everything that goes along with it. So I'm really excited. Thanks so much for the opportunity. We're going to talk a lot about telling stories in places that we don't normally have to tell them now that we're in a different situation. And we're going to kind of do it through this these three pieces that we kind of work through, which is being intentional about the work, opening doors, and building staff. I'm also going to give away some books today. So if you are interested at all in a copy of Hacking Leadership, which I co-authored with my friend Tony Sinanis, please, tweet stuff out to the Impact the Narrative hashtag. And all of those tweets, I'll take all of those tweets at the end of today and we'll pick five, I'll pick 10. I'll pick 10 books and we'll send 10 books out. I'll give 2 away and Tony will give 8 away. So this is really, this is going to be great. I'm very excited about this. This is fantastic. So we'll give 10 books away, but only if you tweet something out to the Impact the Narrative hashtag, and we'll try to get it going from there. Books are very, very helpful for people at home at this time. I mean, I know that they're helpful at my house. So I think it's important that we can be in a spot where we can all help each other out. This book will definitely help out that situation. So anyway, for those people who don't know, I'm Joe. I'm from Fall Creek, Wisconsin. We are the home of the Fall Creek. Say it with me, everybody. Yes, the Fall Creek Crickets. We are the mighty Crickets. We will annoy the heck out of you. Give us the opportunity. That is what we do. Here's Fall Creek, Wisconsin, right here. Take a look at this beautiful, beautiful town. 1,700 people in it, 825 kids at the school. We have no stoplights. We have 3 bars. We have 2 gas stations. We have 1 school. That, people, is Fall Creek, Wisconsin. And I think one of the biggest things about living in a small town is knowing and understanding that you live in this world where a lot of the work that you do is going to be scrutinized. And the thing that I realized about the work that we do is we're going to have all these interactions with people and all of them matter. And the problem that I have is that a lot of people are talking about schools as if they know exactly what happens in schools, but they don't know what happens in schools. They just think that they know because they went to school 25 years ago, right? And they're still jacked up. They didn't get a second chicken sandwich at lunch, or they got put against the wall at recess, or the coach didn't play them, or whatever. And they talk about this stuff like it happened yesterday, and that's not how it works. But these are the conversations that that people have. And what we need to understand about the work that we do and impacting the narrative across the board is people aren't going to change the way that they talk about school until we change the way that we talk about school. And I think we've gone from this place of being really proud of the work that we do to really trying to defend the work that we do. And there's a distinct difference between being proud of the work and defending the work, because when you're proud of the work, you can't wait to talk about the work. And when you're defending the work, you're always waiting for somebody to say something negative to you, and you get hyped up because you want to make sure you defend it again and defend it again and defend it again. And if you're always defending the work to the same person or the same group of people, at some point you start avoiding conversations with that person or that group of people. And so our job is to try to figure out how we can get our people beyond these statements. I'm just a teacher. I'm just a principal. I'm just. And the thing that we need to understand about this is there's so many people that are saying this, and they say it for a couple of reasons. The first reason they say it is because they feel that way, and that's ridiculous because they shouldn't ever feel that way because they're never just anything. But the second reason is sometimes when they say this, it absolves them of any responsibility moving forward. Well, I'm just a teacher. I can't handle that. I'm just a principal. I don't have the opportunities because I'm not running this or doing that or whatever. And when we do that, when we put ourselves into that category, we devalue all of our work. And not only do we devalue our work, but we give the person that we're talking to license to do exactly the same, because they're not going to change the way that they talk about us if we're not going to change, if we never change the way that we talk about us. So one of our biggest jobs moving forward when it comes to impacting the narrative is really thinking about how we can change every conversation about the work that we do, because every conversation matters in some capacity. And it mattered to me when I got here. Like when I got to Fall Creek, Wisconsin, I was the 5th superintendent in 6 years. And so if you're the 5th superintendent in 6 years, the advice that you get is like, rent and good luck, right? Like people, this was like, can we talk about my name tag for a sec? This was my name tag when I got here. I want to be very clear about what's happening with this name tag right now. And I have it. I wish the webcam was working for this one reason only, because I have it here right next to me. People, this is masking tape. All right. Let's be really clear about that. And they were just changing these things out year after year. And the problem wasn't with Fall Creek, Wisconsin at all. It was the narrative about what people in this job were doing or where they were going or whatever the case may be. And changing that narrative was important, but most importantly was trying to figure out ways that we could change the way that people talk about the work that happens in our spot. Because we've been kind of thrust into this situation where I think people perceive to know what we do, but they don't really know what we do until they got kids home, right? And when they got kids home, then they get a sense of what we do. And our job in some capacity is to try to figure out ways that we can connect with these people on a different level. I just feel like there's that people have this perceived journey of who we are and what we did before they realized who we are and what we did. And for us, people look at this and they think that we lived on the left side until now, right? Like, I'd love to live on the left side of this. Like, give me the left side of this thing all day. I want to, when I'm at home, if I'm doing home learning, the online virtual learning, I want to be in a spot where I can wake up in the morning, get a workout. You're probably thinking this is going to feel really good. I'll probably do some journaling after that. That'll feel really good. Get a full-on breakfast. Make sure all the kids are connected, because of course they will be. We'll probably have a class dance party. That'll be great. And then John Krasinski is going to want me on some good news, and life is going to be great. Like this is what we were hoping to happen. People, this is not what happened when we got into this situation. We wake up in the morning and that feels pretty good, but then all of a sudden you have a Zoom session and that's going to get ready, and then you realize that your kids need some breakfast, but then you see all your students online and they're smiling, and that's really fun, and then you need to diaper change somebody, and hopefully it's one of the kids, and then you're like, what's going on? Or they did the diapers thing right on top of you, right? And that's a problem too. But your whole class is online, so that feels so good, and then all of a sudden you get this spinning wheel of death, and then you can't do anything in that space, right? And it all just kind of goes to heck at that point. The thing that we have to understand about the work that we're doing right now is that this is where all the madness is happening, but this is where all some of the great stuff is happening if we're willing to dive in and lean into this situation, right? If we lean in and knowing that this is what it is, it changes how we talk about what it is. I don't love where we're at right now, but when we lean in and say we're going to be okay, we're going to figure this out, it changes the way that people talk about the work that we're doing. And for us, this is not a time at all for us to say, see, parents, see, community members, see, I told you our job is really hard. Do you see this? Our job is really hard. Can you believe this? Our job is really hard. This is the time for us to lean in and say, we are here for you. You did not ask for this. You did not choose this. This is where we are. It's not ideal, but we're willing to help. This is what we do. So those are the things that we want to talk about today. And I kind of talk about things when the rules of three. I'm always in the rule of three. I feel like I'm always in the rule of three. And the rule of three for me, like we talk about being intentional, opening doors and building staff. I talk about recognize, acknowledge, extend conversations, find your audience, build your brand, connect with people, and make sure that the messages are simple, unique, and repeatable. So those are the things that we're going to talk about today. At the end of each section, we're also going to give you 3 tips on how you can do these things practically and get yourself rolling sometime within the next half hour or so. And then we're going to take some questions and hopefully you'll glean like one positive thing out of it. You know, if you can get 45 minutes and get one idea to move forward, then I think you're going to hopefully be in a good spot. Maybe I'll even tell I don't know if I'll tell a joke. I do some magic. I can't show you my magic right now because of the webcam, but of course I'm magic, and we do magic every morning. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but these are the things that we're going to talk about moving forward. And the first one is really, how are we intentional about the work that we do? Because the thing that we need to understand about the work that we do is that we have all of these interactions with the people in the context of our community, and now they're happening online. And the thing that we need to understand about these interactions is that every single one of them matter, because every one of them could be the one that they talk about for the rest of their lives. We just don't know which one that's going to be, right? And so if we walk into every conversation knowing that that might be the one that they talk about, we treat that conversation a little bit differently. All these conversations, you just never know what people are going to remember. I remember before I was a superintendent and a principal, I was a counselor in Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin, and I used to go into classrooms and do these little team building games. And I remember doing this one team building game one time where I'd walk into the classroom and I'd say, all right, people, we're all going on, it was a third grade class. We're all going on a picnic. Who wants to come on this picnic with me? And they're all like raising their hands. I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to go on this picnic. My name is Mr. San Filippo, and I'm going to be bringing sandwiches to the picnic. Who wants to come on this picnic with me? Right? And nobody got, like, I'm 3 minutes into this activity and nobody gets it. Like, they're all just staring at me like I got 9 heads, and that's not a good feeling at all. So I ditched the activity because nobody got it. Sandwiches, San Filippo brought sandwiches. Tommy could have brought tomatoes. Jimmy could have brought, like, I don't know, like jelly beans or something. It had to start with the first letter of their first name, or first letter of their name, right? Nobody got it. So I never did that activity again, ever, ever, ever. I did it one time with a third grade class. It lasted 3 minutes. Fast forward 10 years later, I'm back in Ashwaubenon, Wisconsin, having lunch with a former student who was actually in third grade at the time. We do the whole selfie thing. We put that tweet, we tweet it out, put it online, and then we get this response to the tweet, and this kid says, hey, you still bringing sandwiches to the picnic? And I'm like, are you kidding me right now? Like, I did that thing one time 10 years ago, and this is what this kid remembers. This one thing, man. Pete, you just don't know. And so if we find ourselves in a spot where we can understand that all of these interactions matter, we have a better chance for us to be in a spot that they're going to talk about these things later. So the thing that we've been talking about here is, how do we make sure that we do these 3 things better than anybody else, online or in person? How do we recognize the great things that our colleagues are doing, that our staff members are doing, and then acknowledge those things to the staff member, and then finally extend the conversation to somebody who wasn't there so they know that those great things are happening? And if we can do that, if we can recognize the greatness of our people and acknowledge to them that they're great at whatever this is, and then extend the conversation to somebody who wasn't there, that impacts the way that other people talk about your people. And if that happens, now that essentially gets back to them on some level. And that's really a truly important component of what we were doing. So here's what I'm going to have you do. I'm going to give you, the thing that we talk about a lot is the idea that we build culture in 30 seconds, and every 30 seconds is an opportunity to tell a great story about the people in our space. So here's what I want you to do. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. In those 30 seconds, I want you to put out there, either send an email, send a tweet, do something to celebrate somebody in your world, somebody who's doing great things, and just celebrate them. Celebrate them. If you celebrate them in the with the impact the narrative hashtag, they're gonna, they may get a book. You never know. They might just get a book. But if you tweet that out, send a picture of them, whatever the case may be, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do that. Send a tweet out, send a message out, do something to celebrate somebody publicly about the work that they're doing. I'm going to give you 30 seconds, all right? Your 30 seconds, holy cannoli, your 30 seconds starts now. All right, time. Finish up if you haven't finished up. But the thing about I didn't have any music to play for you, which I would love. I should have just played some music. I got it on my phone. I should have played some music. Anyway, so the thing that we need to understand about that is, the intentionality of telling a story is important, and you never know what one positive comment is going to do for someone who might actually need it at that particular time. I remember when I was an awful student, and absolutely I was an awful student. I would always try just enough to get by. it wasn't good. It wasn't a good situation. And I was not, and actually I wasn't a good, I didn't like to speak publicly at all either. So I remember in middle school, our teacher told us that we were going to recite this poem. And I'm like, well, that sounds like fun. I'll just recite a poem. That's great. We all had to pick a poem. And so all my classmates are picking this poem that they're going to recite. And it gets to my turn. And I wasn't paying attention at all to these poems that people were guessing. I'm like, I'll just pick a poem. And the next one on the list was like The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. And I said, I'll recite The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere. And my classmates like looked at me like, are you out of your mind? What have you done? Well, I didn't realize it was the longest poem. And I'm like, if I would have been paying attention, I probably would have known that. So I go through and I try to recite the poem after a couple of weeks practice the best I could. I get done with it. I did it just to get it done. And I got finished with it. And as soon as I got finished with it, I took this big, deep breath and I'm out there in front of the class and I finished this poem and I look out to the class and I asked for any questions. And there was this girl who sat in the second row, in the second seat of the second row, and her name was Tanya. And she raised her hand. And I'm like, oh man. So she raised her hand and then she just looked at me and she said, I'm really proud of you. I'm really proud of you. And as an 8th grade kid, like that meant the world, because not only did I feel good about what I had just done, but I felt like I wanted to do it again. And if we're in that spot where we're building people up so they want to do it again, then we change the conversation about the work that happens, right? And the more that we can do that, I think the better chance that we have to move forward. So one of the things that I had to do for myself to try to figure out how I could, intentionally put myself in a place to recognize, acknowledge, and extend the people in my spot was think about what are the first 10 things that I do to start my day. And if the first 10 things that you do to start your day are all things that don't bring you joy, then you really have to think about what are those 10 things. So what my suggestion, or what I did, I shouldn't say suggestion, the thing that I had to do to pull myself out of it was trying to find where those 10 things were and move them up on the list a little bit. I always try to I start my day right now by reading stories and doing a magic trick for the kids on our Facebook Live page. And people would say, well, you're doing that for the kids. That's fantastic. I'm like, well, I am kind of, I guess, but I'm really doing it for me because it puts me in a totally different mindset to start my day when I'm sitting there and I'm reading stories and laughing. And then I do some magic tricks. And the magic is, and then after the magic trick, I can, put out online, well, I'm magic. I'm totally magic. I'm really magic, because I end up getting texts and calls and FaceTimes from kids that are saying, you're not magic. I saw the string. I saw it. You're not magic at all. And then we go back and forth and I'm arguing with an 8-year-old, but I'm going to win that conversation every time. Well, 9 out of 10 times. And I'm arguing back and forth. And then I always end by saying, well, I'll see you tomorrow. I guess I'll see you tomorrow. We'll prove it tomorrow, because I know that they're going to come back the next day. So that helps the conversation in terms of the work that we do, and hopefully brings them back the next day to what we're doing. And so when we can create that process where we create a spot where people's story has value, then they're willing to tell their story on a number of different levels. So a lot of times we're just really intentional about what that looks like. So, I'll put this whole messaging thing that we did for all of the COVID-19 things that are going on, we're just really intentional about the messaging. We're really intentional about the story. We're really intentional about the branding. We're really intentional about making sure that people know and understand what we're doing so they have that information. When we're at school, the other thing that we always say, right before we get into any conversation about what's going to happen is, I've said in every communication, we've said, we're going to be okay. We say thank you and we're going to be okay. And that changes the conversation because it puts people in the right mindset to hear you a different way. When we're at school, we always start our meetings with kids, and I think that conversation, this is Caden. Caden came up to me one day as a 3rd grade student. He said, Dr. Stanfield, I just got back from the visually impaired Olympics in Denver and I won these ribbons. Do you think I could come to the school board and talk to him about my ribbons? I'm like, well, yes, of course. So he comes and talks about the ribbons, does this whole thing, and he gets all done. Everybody's smiling and just this beautiful child. And right before he leaves, he says one more thing. He says, I want to say one more thing. I want to say thank you to Mrs. Moore. She's my paraprofessional. She helps me get around school. She just makes it a lot easier for me. Now think about this. First of all, what happens to Mrs. Moore when we start talking budget in the spring, right? She's not a number, she's a story. But then think about what's happening right now, clearly, when people are wondering, when we talk about essential workers and who's essential to the building, there's no question at all who's essential to our building. It's not just teachers, it's not just custodians and food service and people preparing food service. It's our aides and our drivers and everything. They're all essential. But when they come with a story like Caden's story, it changes the conversation because the story wins every single time. We have to understand that we live in this world where we'll definitely protect what we built in terms of that in the work that we do. So being intentional for us is really about taking advantage of what's moving forward and making sure that people can talk about us the right way. So the 3 tips that I would give you in terms of being intentional, the first one is start and end your day with joy. I always start my day by making sure that, with the stories and the magic. That's fantastic. But I always end my day making calls to kids on the birthday list, but right before I get home. And the reason is I want to make sure that I'm in the right mindset for the people that when I get home, for the people that I care about, to make sure that they know that I'm in the right mindset to be there with them. The other thing is be the known entity, meaning, have some consistency to the work that you're doing so you know when the messages are going out, or so people know when the messages are going out. So people know that, that you're going to say thank you and that you're going to be okay before you be the known entity in a time where there's not a lot of known entities. And the last thing is build your staff network. And when I say that, I think people are thinking about building their staff members. Well, what we're talking about is the fact that all of your staff members have new colleagues, right? They all have new colleagues. Some of them are 2, some of them are 4, some of them are potty training, some of them are back from college, some of them don't even want to be in the house anymore because they want to go out and see their girlfriend. All of this is happening. These are their new colleagues. How are you building up their new colleagues? Are you sending texts to the spouses or the kids of your staff members to make sure that they know how valuable that mom or dad is to the kids in this space? We have my son called me. My 16-year-old called me about an hour ago. And I said, hey, Kaylee, what's up, buddy? He's like, well, I just spent the morning talking to teachers. And I'm like, well, that's fantastic. How'd it go? He said, well, I called all of them. And I'm like, well, what do you mean you called all of them? He's like, well, they called us last week to make sure that we were doing okay. And I just wanted to check to make sure that they were doing okay. And I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. Whose child are you? That is fantastic. I love it. And he was so excited to talk to me about it. And he said, yeah, it made me feel better too. So please understand that all of these things put us in a spot that make everybody feel better if we're being intentional about building the people around the people who are taking care of kids. So our message has always been take care of kids and those who take care of kids. And if we can move that forward, I think we're going to be in a better spot. So I think the other thing that we need to consider is how are we making sure that we open doors so people know and understand the work that happens in space. And when I talk about knowing and understanding what that really looks like, we always talk about the idea that in the absence of knowledge, people tend to make up their own, which really means that every time that we get a chance to connect with people, we're impacting the narrative of what happens in the story that we tell. And when I talk about story, I always talk about the fridge, always. Like when I was a kid, everything that I did went on the fridge, everything that I draw a circle on a piece of paper, my mom puts it on the fridge. All of my sister's report cards are up there, none of mine. That's another webinar if you want to do that later. Like I'm a doctor now, she's not, but whatever. So so now my mom doesn't have a fridge that looks like this anymore, but she's got this. And now she can annoy people all over the country with her phone. I would be very surprised if she's not on this webinar right now. There are almost 600 people on this webinar. I would almost guarantee that one of them is Betty Tucker Sanfilippo in Wisconsin, because she just shows up at stuff. I was in Iowa a couple years ago, and I'm doing the whole thing, and there's like 1,000 people in the audience, and all of a sudden I look off to the right, and I'm like, Mom, what are you doing here? She's like, I just wanted to come and hear you speak. And I said, Mom, all these people paid to get here. You can't just show up at this stuff. She goes, I paid. They even made me pay the out-of-state rate. So thank you to Grantwood AEA in Iowa for making her pay the out-of-state rate. But she just wanted to see her kid speak. That's all there is to it. And if we get ourselves to the place where we can feed on the emotions of the people that we're talking a better chance for those conversations to move forward. I can tell you that in Fall Creek during homecoming, all of our kids get together to do games and play stuff, play games and have a good time, right? I can tell you, and that's one thing, but when I show you, it's different. Because when I show you, you connect to the emotion of Matt and Sam in that picture. This is what happens. These are the facts. We talk about facts and feelings. Let's make sure that the feelings connect to the facts, because if the feelings connect to the facts, then that story is going to get told because of the emotional connection that people have. So the other thing that we talk about when we talk about impacting is how do we make sure that these three things are at the heart of what we do moving forward. How do we find our audience, build our brand, and connect with the work that happens? So when it comes to audience, we have been so lucky to connect with Andrea Gribble and Social School for EDU on not only their analytics in terms of the connection, but how and why and where the storytelling takes place. She's fantastic. Her group is fantastic. If you get a chance to work with them with their coaching program, even just see, I'm sure she'll tweet something out, but like 100 ideas to tweet for social media, that kind of stuff. Just really, really great stuff. And that connects to all of our social stuff. So our audience is really talking about, our parents live on Facebook, our kids live on Instagram, our alumni live on Twitter, and we want to make sure that we're connecting to those situations as much as we can. So your brand is really, how are these stories coming together? And when we tell people about brand, is make sure that whatever you're talking about and however much long you're talking about it, that it's simple, unique, and repeatable. Because if something is simple, unique, and repeatable, you can get to the place where you can have great conversations about the work that you're doing. So we give for us, we have all this Fall Creek stuff. We have all of this stuff, right? And all of this stuff is really kind of goes around this Go Cricket, hashtag and what we're doing, because it gives our people a chance to have an identity in terms of the work that we do. So we just take this Go Cricket stuff and literally put it on everything, man. We have Go Cricket stuff everywhere. I don't what do you need, a bow tie? I'll get you a bow tie. I got it. We got it all, right? We got all this stuff. We give this stuff. We got a Go Cricket store. You want Go Cricket's water? I'll get you Go Cricket's water. Crazy people put it on their license plates. Even crazier people put it on their fence. Sometimes that fence lights up. That's mine. So all of this stuff happens. If you sign up to be a substitute teacher in Fall Creek, you're getting a shirt. Governor shows up, he's going to get a shirt. We have a Where in the World is Fall Creek Pride board. We've got all the states across the country, represented with stuff with Fall Creek. All of this stuff is important, and we give it away. And I think the thing that we have to understand is it has an impact, because a couple years ago we took this group to model schools in Orlando. And when they went to speak, they walked into their room to do their presentation, and it looked like this. And the reason was people knew who they were and they wanted to hear their story. And when they got done, they went and did the same presentation for the school board. And one of my teachers, after she got done, looked at me, looked at the team, looked at the board, and told everybody how they felt there. It's a different conversation when they feel like this. When they feel like this, they're going to perform like this. And that's an opportunity for us to move people forward in the right direction. And the only reason that there are nearly 600 people on this thing, or 550 people on this thing, is it's because we talk about what we do. You know who we are in Fall Creek, Wisconsin, because we talk about what we do. The work that you're doing in your school district is as good or better, but we get to talk about what we do because we talk about what we do. And everybody's story has value in some capacity, right? And so the last thing is, how do you connect the audience to the brand? And for us, it's social media, obviously. But when we talk about social media, don't ever forget that the first word in social media matters. Social matters, because we want to make sure that we're in a place where we're being social with our groups, where we're going back and forth, where it doesn't just turn into a bulletin board, it turns into a conversation, because the conversation is what brings us to the right spot moving forward. All right, everybody, here's what I want. We are 28 minutes into this thing. We're going to take a quick break because I got to catch my breath. But here's what I want you to do. You don't have to do this. I'm not going to check to see if you did it, but I'm going to give you a math test, and I need you to stand up for this math test. All right, everybody stand up, because this is a really tough math test. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to put a bunch of numbers on the board and on the screen, and I want you to add up those numbers as fast as you can, right, to get the right answer. Say it out loud, though, right? So if I put a 100 up there and I put another 100, you're going to say, I heard it. I heard it from here. 200. Well done. But you're very smart people. All right, here we go. So we're going to do them really quick. All right, are you ready? Are you ready? They're going to come really fast. Be ready. Be ready. Here we go. All right. So did you get, so say your number out loud. A lot of people out there, I'm positive, said that it was 5,000, right? No, it's not. It's 4,100, right? And I think the thing that we need to understand is that now, what if I would have done it like this? What if I would have put ourselves in a spot where I just moved that number over just a little bit, right? What if I move that number over just a little bit where we get to the point where a lot of us learned how to do math? Then you don't get that number. Then you're much more likely to get the right number. You're not going to get 5,000 because you've seen it and it makes sense to you. So we want to put this stuff in a place where we can force engagement in a way that people can know and understand and connect with it immediately. Like they don't have to think about it. They just connect with it immediately. So we put things like we'll put a sticker on the car of a news station and tweet that out, forcing the engagement. Our Wi-Fi names, our hotspots have Go Crickets on it. So like when you go places, people see our Go Cricket stuff and then they'll tweet stuff out. Hey, Joe must be close. He's got the Go Cricket stuff. I don't know if anybody's seen these 1-minute walk to work things that I do. So I do these little 1-minute walk to work because I live across the street from school and I walk across the street and I do these little leadership talks or whatever. But in this minute and 30 or minute and 40, we drop 6 Fall Creek drops in the minute and 30. So check this out. There's Fall Creek, Wisconsin. I say that. Okay, there's another one here. There's another, that's 3 around the corner. There's 4 on my fence. Come around the corner, that's 5. And then we always end the same way with Go Crickets. So in a minute and 40, there's 6 Fall Creek drops in that spot, right? It's Sundays. What are people in Wisconsin doing on Sundays? I know that people in Wisconsin on Sundays from 12 to 3 are watching Packer games. I know that when the Packer game goes to commercial, everybody goes to their phone. So what if you're in that spot during Packer games that during the commercial, you're retweeting stuff from your school district, so people are going to be able to see it. So it jumps up to the top of their feed. And that takes care of like August through, August, in Wisconsin, we have football through January. I know there's people on here from Ohio and Illinois and Texas and Minnesota, and your football usually ends in December. But in January, there's football too. Not that you knew that, but there's January football. So we can get stuff all the way out there through January, right? That's a really big deal. So understand that we're in this spot where, people are willing to talk about you outside of your spot if you're willing to have conversations with them as well. And that's been really big for us. And I think we just have to understand that our world is changing in some capacity. Here's Tiger Woods playing golf in 2002. Here's Tiger Woods playing golf in 2018, right? Better 1, better 2, better A, better B, right? I don't know which one's better, but the world is changing and we get to the spot where we can tell stories on a different level, and we got to be willing to be in that spot with people, right? I mean, this happens in our towns too. Here's Fall Creek, Wisconsin. Here's a kindergarten concert. This is one of these things. This happens in your town too. In 2018, there were 1.3 trillion pictures taken. 85% of those pictures are by smartphones, and everybody seems to have them. That equates to literally 2 million pictures every minute, right? And it gives us the opportunity to tell stories from our pocket, this is an opportunity for us. And I think people are really scared about what social could actually do for people because they're afraid of, that something's going to go wrong. And something's going to go wrong. Let's be clear. Like, if you're just waiting for something to go wrong, like, it's going to go wrong. Like, something's going to happen where you're not going to get, like, something's going to go wrong. Let's just be really, really clear like that. I mean, like, maybe a couple years ago when you send out an email to a bunch of families, just let them know that the bus is going to be a little bit late. And maybe in that email to, 950 families, maybe you just forget a letter, like maybe just one letter. So these things happen, right? They happen, and we have to understand that they're going to happen. But if you build up enough social capital, then you get to the place where when it happens again, like it did 2 months ago, where did you know that in Fall Creek, Wisconsin, that all these kids were making cupcakes, and those cupcakes were really fantastic? Those cupcakes were so good that they're going to fuel you up a little bit. Whoops. I mean, come on. That's not the kind of cupcake that we want from an elementary school. But when you have the social capital built, you have an opportunity to kind of push that off to the side and say, you know what, those things happen. And it doesn't become an indictment on who you are because you get to the place where you've built up social capital to move forward. All right, this is my last activity for you. Here's what I want you to do. here is what I want you to do. Get out a piece of paper real quick. Okay, get out a piece of paper. All right. So here's what I want you to do. With your piece of paper, take out something to write on and put that piece of paper and a pen right there. Put the piece of paper on your head with the pen. Right now, the pen you're gonna hold in one hand, piece of paper on the top. Put it on a book. If you got if you have like a extra copy of like Personal Authentic, mine usually like balances table, but this might work out for that. So you put it up there, right? That's shots for Tom Murray. All right. And I'm going to show you a picture. I want you to draw the picture exactly the way that you see it on the screen. Draw it without looking, top of your head, draw it right now. Go. All right, when you're done, take a look at it, see how you did. My guess is if you want to tweet that picture out, I'm gonna give a couple books away to just people who tweet the picture of their pumpkin on their head out. Impact the narrative, #go. That would be fantastic. That's going to be fantastic. I love it. I love it. I love it. All right, we're going to do another one, right? This time, put the paper right in front of you, right? Put the paper right in front of you and get ready to draw. Put paper right in front of you. We'll put another picture up there and then just draw this exactly the way you see it. All right, I'm going to give you 30 seconds to do it. Here we go. Ready? And go. All right, time. Okay, so now look at the two pictures. This is low hanging fruit, right? Like, obviously when you look at the one that you just drew, you started drawing and then you looked up and then you drew and then you looked up and then you drew and then you looked up. You didn't have to decide what you thought it might look like. We have so many people in our communities that are deciding what they think your place may look like based on what happened to them 25 years ago. And we impact the narrative by making sure that they can look up and look down and look up and look down and look up and look down for the accurate piece of what we're doing. So the three tips in terms of opening the doors are: don't forget the social and social media so you can interact with people throughout. It really helps the engagement, the analytics, it gets more push, but it also creates a conversation, which is where you want to be. Force your way into the feeds, meaning the Sundays in Wisconsin, or making sure that you're posting at the time where people are up early brushing their teeth, up late brushing their teeth, whatever the case may be. And then the last one is the power of moments mentality. Chip and Dan Heath wrote a great book on the power of moments, and they said that people remember two things about an event. They remember the peak of the event and they remember the end of the event. So the peak is the higher, the lower the event. So you can't always control the peak, but you can control the end. So what are you doing to control the end of the moment to make sure that they can have a conversation about what it looks like moving forward? All right, so we are down to literally like 5 minutes. And I want to get to the last part of this, which is how are we intentional about impacting the narrative? And I think the first thing that we think about when it comes to building staff and what it looks like is I think a lot of us are expecting ourselves in other people. And that, if we're always expecting us in others, then we're always in a place where we don't know exactly where they're coming from or where they're at or anything that goes along with it. So when we expect that, we have to be very careful because we don't know. Everybody's struggling with something. Everybody's struggling with something. The question becomes, how are we making sure that we can move people forward in a way that values who they are? In one of my first years as a principal, I remember I always want to be like the first person in and out, or first person in the building, last person out of the building. And I remember one night I was so mad because I was there at like 7 o'clock, and there was one teacher who wouldn't go home, and she wouldn't go home, and she wouldn't go home. And I'm like, well, I got to be the last person. I'm gonna wait for her to go home. Why won't she go home? And I kept checking on her. I'm like, you can go home. It's okay. This stuff will be here tomorrow. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about this stuff. Because I just wanted to go home, right? I'm like, no, you can't. I kept checking back and checking back and checking back, and she wouldn't leave. And so I was so mad. Finally, she left, and I left, and I was in such a bad place. I'm like, I can't believe it's 7 o'clock, and I'm just getting home. This is ridiculous. What I didn't realize was the reason that she didn't want to go home was because her kids were with her ex-husband that night. And if she went home, she was going home to an empty house. And so she was at school to get her mind away from the fact that she wasn't home with her kids. And here I am trying to push her out to a place that she didn't want to be. I'm like, come on. If I would have known that by asking the right question, because I didn't, then I would have known that I could have left that for her. But she was just in a place that was good for her. And that's an important piece of what we're doing. So when we talk about moving people forward and building staff, I always kind of equate it to these 5 little areas. And I think organizations are built into 5 different components. I'm not the only one that feels that way. Schlechte calls them trailblazers, pioneers, standardized, stay-at-homes. Everett Rogers talks about early adopters, early majority, late majority. I'm not that smart. I just called them 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And when I did my dissertation work. And I think what we have to understand is that everybody in our group operates differently. Like your ones, if you tell the ones to run through the door, like if you tell the ones you need to run through that wall right now, like they're going to run. They won't even ask questions. They just start running, right? They don't even ask why. You told them, so they go. The 2s are like, okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to wait until the 1s are almost through the wall. And then when they're almost through the wall, I'm going to push them. And then I'm going to show up on the other side, and it's going to look like I was one of the first people over here, and then people are going to look at me a different way, right? And the 3s are like, I really like teaching dinosaurs. I'm really good at it. I'm going to stay here teaching dinosaurs. And then when the hole in the wall is perfectly framed out and wide enough where I can bring my dinosaur stuff, then I'll go to the other side of the wall, right? And the 4s are like, I'm not going. You can't really make me go. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to walk over to that wall as slowly as I possibly can, because my hope is when I get there, there's a change in leadership and there's another wall like across the room that you're going to make me run through, so I can go to that one. And then the 5s are like, I'm not going. You can't make me go. Not only am I not going to go, but I'm going to put every brick in this district up against that wall before the 1s start to run through it. The thing that we have to understand is all of these groups have value, and all of these groups got there probably before you even arrived, right? There's nothing wrong with the person that was teaching dinosaurs that just wants to go to the other side and bring some of their stuff because they know that their stuff has a little value and they don't want to lose out on that. Right? So the more that we can help people move forward, the better chance we have for them to figure out what they really want to do and be part of the movement. These 5s don't wake up in the morning and say, I can't wait to be a 5. Like something happened to them where they didn't feel valued in their work. And so for us, one of the things that we changed up about our work was doing these passion projects for adults, where our people get a chance to pick what they want to learn about through the year, and then they learn about that, and then at the end of the year they report on that as at this street fair that we do with all of our groups. And that's been really productive because it gives them ownership of their learning. And then when they get ownership of their learning, obviously that can transfer over to where kids are, because they know what it feels like to own their learning. And we'll live stream this. We live streamed it the first year, and 21,000 people watched our video of our teachers teaching other teachers. And then when that happens, now they know that their audience is bigger than just the people around them. And that helps everybody within the context of where they're at, right? I think everybody's trying to do the best they can. And if we understand that, we change the conversation about what we're going to do. All right, the last thing that I want to talk to you about is how do we onboard people? You're in that spot right now where you're going to be bringing people in to your organization. And this has a huge impact on the narrative if you can onboard people in a way that makes them want to tell the story about how they were onboarded, right? So if we think about it, 12% of US employees say their organization does a great job of onboarding employees, right? So if you are in that 12% and you're in a spot where you're like battling for teachers because of the teacher shortage, this gives you a leg up on what you're doing. Like 10 years ago, we started doing press conferences This is 2010. It's awful. It's absolutely awful. But then you fast forward to 3 years ago and you do the back, you get the backdrop. There's our new high school principal getting hired. Take a picture with him and his family, get that picture, put that picture on Facebook, right? And then before this guy even steps foot into the district, there's 900 views and 300 likes saying, welcome to Fall Creek, Wisconsin. And it's important because we do the same thing with our teachers, and it makes them feel like they're part of something that they weren't part of before and connect to where they want to go moving forward. And when you make the offer, instead of me calling and saying, hey, you want to come teach second grade in Fall Creek, Wisconsin, what if you bring the candidate in and let them, let the team that wants them to be part of your organization offer the job? Here's Emily getting a job. Here's Cassia. Cassia gets a job offer to teach seventh grade math. And then what people don't know is we're outside in the hallway with all the kids that are going to be in her classroom. They don't know that she said yes. They walk into the room and then they offer her the job. And then this is the story that gets told, because then you say to Cassia, Cassia, I can delete this thing right now, or I can send this to your mom. You tell me which one you want to do. And it changes the conversation, because now she's telling stories, so is mom. Last year or 2 years ago, we had a candidate came into our office and said that her inspiration for teaching was Mrs. Peach. Mrs. Peach was the reason she wanted to be a teacher. And so maybe when she gets the job offer and you make enough calls and your staff members can get a hold of them, get a hold of Mrs. Peach. And maybe Mrs. Peach is there and Mrs. Peach can offer her the job, right? Now, these are the stories that not only impact the candidate moving forward, but the inspiration for teaching. That story is going to get told over and over and over again. Every one of these opportunities is a chance for people to be the teacher that all of these kids tell their kids about. And if we do some of these things just a little bit more intentional, we have a better chance of being the one that they talk about moving forward. So the passion projects, valuing everybody's moments, and then also creating a moment from the interview, listening really, really hard in the interview to something that the candidate values, and then making the offer based on what they said in the interview on something that was really special to them, a moment, right? Or a person or whatever, because at that point, now they're creating a moment for everybody moving forward, right? And all of these things come back to the idea that if we never give up the opportunity to say something great about our kids, our school, or our colleagues, we can change the way that people talk about the incredible things that we do if we're willing to understand that all of these interactions matter on some level. And if we take every interaction impactfully or intentionally, we can impact the way that people talk about the work that we do. All right, people, you have just listened to me way too long. Is there anybody left? 4 people. Awesome. So 4 people are left. That's a good feeling. Good feeling. Arlen, are you there, my man?
I'm still here, Joe. Yes, I'm ready with questions loaded.
Only 3 then. Okay, that's good.
Yeah, me and 3 of my friends.
I love it. I love it. All right, you got questions?
Yeah, luckily these 4 people who are left asked a ton of questions. So let's start here with question number 1. Joe, what is your number 1 or 2 or 3 top things you are telling your teachers to do online during this time right now? Any specific starters?
Connect with kids, connect with kids, connect with kids. And then after that, I tell them, connect with kids, connect with kids, connect with kids. So here's the thing that's really interesting about that is I had one teacher, I was walking home the other day, it's about 9 o'clock and she's in the building, right? And I'm like, so well, what's going on? And she said, I just feel awful. And I'm like, well, so what's going on? Let's talk about it. And she said, well, so I'm making better connections with my kids, but I don't feel like I'm doing enough. And I'm like, okay, so you're burying the lead. The lead is you're making better connections with your kids. Are the kids going to remember the Unifix cubes? Or are the kids going to remember that during a FaceTime yesterday that they took you outside to show you a bear paw and then put their hand by the bear paw and then told you as a first grader that they were going to set up a camera to see if they could catch the bear? That's what they're going to remember. Connect with kids, talk to kids, have fun with kids, but connect with kids.
Wonderful. Question from Matthew. You mentioned Twitter, and you are certainly active on your account, but who makes up your PLN on Twitter? Who are you following?
Oh, man. I don't like trying to narrow it down to a couple people would be tough. I'll put a list out. I'll tweet a list out today of all the people that I follow, or of different groups that we follow. And it kind of depends. People who are telling great stories, people who are incredible leaders, people who I just like to talk to. I mean, they're all over the place. So I think that it just kind of depends on what on what your bend is.
Okay, Aaron says, love the merchandise. How can I, as an AP, impact the narrative without any budgeting, even when asked?
So it comes down to the conversation, and like I always end every conversation with "Go Crickets." Every interview, everything always ends in "Go Crickets." We always start with like if you watch the videos, I tell people Fall Creek, Wisconsin, that kind of thing, and end with "Go Crickets" because we want people to hear us as they walk out. That's the biggest one, is making sure that you have something that you can keep coming back to. And guess what? They're going to make fun of you for it. I promise they will. People will make fun of you. They'll make fun of me for saying "Go Crickets" everywhere I go, right? They do. Some people call me Cricket. That's the thing. Probably because I'm not that tall. I'm not that tall, and I'm super loud and annoying. So maybe that's part of it. But the other part is that they always hear me say it. "Go Crickets, go Crickets, go Crickets." I'm always talking about it. So I would say that that's the first thing, is just every time that you can talk about your school, have a catchphrase, have an elevator speech that you're always coming back to.
Wonderful. Okay, Don asks, any suggestions if we have to start the year with remote learning and not getting to know our students?
I would say that, well, okay, I guess I can only put us in that position here. So in our position, what we would probably do as we think about it is, how are we trying to make connections with kids, even if it's a letter, even if it's a quick call. I mean, the call has been the biggest thing. If you can make a call to a kid and have a conversation, that's really impactful. It clearly was impactful to my son, because my son went and called his teachers today, which I'm so proud of, by the way. He's just, what a great kid. So I think that the first thing is, reaching out and making the initial connection, and then making sure that you write stuff down that you talk about so you can come back to it, because you'll have a lot of kids. So write that stuff down so you can do that, so you can come back to it.
Okay. And yes, folks, there are still more than 4 people still left. We had a few concerned citizens, Joe, that we dropped down to 4. We're still at 500, so we're okay.
That's right. I'm very loud. I'm very loud. And I've been getting texts from people saying, yeah, you're really loud. You're super loud.
That's great. Got to make sure they can hear you all the way from
Well,
Wisconsin.
you try to lean into these people. You want to make sure even the ones that call you loud, you want to lean into them as much as you can.
Yes. A question from Jonathan. Where is your Cricket Spirit Shop located, and who is the lead on that for you? How did you fund its startup?
We used to run it out of the district office. We have one on site that get if you go to, when we start the year next year, if you go to gocricketsmerch.com, you'll be able to order stuff online. But we have one in here. So right now a class is running it. One of the business ed classes is running it.
Okay, here's a tough question for you, Joe. What are 3 easy ways to change the high school culture in a school?
Listen to 17 more webinars. No, I don't know. The first thing is value people, like where they're at. Like I think nobody moves. Everybody's A to B is different, and nobody moves to B if you don't value where their A is, even if it's not where you want them to be. So if there's a way, we do that recognize, acknowledge, and extend thing ad nauseum. Like recognize the great work of a colleague, acknowledge it to that colleague, and then extend that conversation to somebody who wasn't there. Because inevitably, what happens is the person that you tell the story to about a colleague will go back and tell that person that they're great at their job because somebody at one point did it for them. That's how you change. Here's the thing: we talk about changing a culture. The culture is really, are people willing to have their story told? Because when people are willing to have their story told, then the conversation changes. So nobody changes if they don't feel like their story has value. And even if that's not exactly where you want them to be, as long as you value where they start, you have a place for them to move. And for us, forward is forward. Let's try to figure out a way to get them there.
Joseph asked, what books have impacted your educational leadership?
Oh man. I think The Power of Moments was easily the best book that I've read in years. Chip and Dan Heath's The Power of Moments, but I don't know if there's the one in particular that has made that impact. But I think it's more of the connection to the best part about books now is that you read all these books and the authors are readily accessible to you. You know, I can call Jimmy Casas and have a conversation with him about what he wrote in his book, or Tom Murray, or Amber Tiemann, or Tony, or George Couros, or all of these people that work, or Melinda Miller, all of these people that we're connected to, that you can have a conversation and dive a little bit deeper into it because they're accessible online. So I don't know if there's one text that did it for me, outside of the fact that the connections with the authors, I think, are really, really, the happiness advantage is another one that just, like, it's so simple and so impactful. I just really feel like those are the things that just jump out at me. I'm looking at trying to look back at my bookshelf right now. I can't see it from here, but go ahead. What else?
All right, we got time for a couple more. Thank you guys so much for all these awesome questions. So I apologize if we do not have time to get to yours, but here's one from David that says, how do you show your staff on all levels that they are valued during this tough time?
Call them, talk to them, reach out to their staff, reach out to their networks, make sure that they know that, like, just a couple minutes on the phone is going to help that conversation, and just realize where they're at. I was like a week and a half ago, I was just like so focused on them connecting with kids that I failed to realize that they needed to connect with each other and for me to connect with them. So I kept telling them, don't forget to connect with your kids. Don't forget to connect with your kids. Don't forget to connect with your kids. And when they were doing that, they were taking away from their own family. And that I was just so, I was so one-sided in that. It's totally on me. And I had to realize that these people are trying to connect with kids while also, changing diapers and getting food ready for their own family. And one of our teachers was talking about being on a Zoom call and her daughter peed on her during the Zoom call. I'm like, yeah, see, I don't deal with any of that stuff. But if I'm not empathetic to the fact that it's happening, then I'm really being short-sighted.
All right, time for one more final question here from Kirk. How do you help your staff members to also detach and to practice self-care?
I would love to say that I model it and then that works out really well, but I'm awful. I'm absolutely awful. So I think I think actually when I do model it, I think it probably goes a lot further because people know that I don't model it very well to begin with. So I think the first thing that I would say to them is, you have to be willing to let them live the way that they want to live through some of this stuff. Like I can give our whole staff, like on Friday, we had a staff development day on Friday, and we had a meeting at 8:30 in the morning for everybody just to kind of get the day settled and move forward. And I said, all right, I want everybody done and gone, out of no more connections, no school stuff. By noon today, everybody's done. Just be done, right? Well, that's great for people who can be done by noon. Or that's great for people who have to get off the call, take care of kids, and then get back to their work at noon or after. So even saying that out loud isn't valuing everybody because they still have stuff that they're doing. So I don't know. I think you got to try to be empathetic to where they're at, and how we can all help each other moving forward as much as we can, but also realize that you don't live in their world. You just have to make sure that you listen to what their world is.
Perfect. Well, that's a great note to end on, Joe. We want to thank you so much for your passion and your energy and the information you shared out with all of our participants. We had a huge crowd turn out. Appreciate all the questions. Sorry we couldn't get to all of them in the hour here, but I do want to remind people to check out edleadersnetwork.org. That is the reason we're able to put these webinar live events on. We've got a stable of about 50 of these, some dealing directly with remote learning and leading during the crisis. We also have 115 on-demand professional learning courses on the website. We've got everything from the state-mandated trainings like bloodborne pathogens to teacher evaluation and calibration, restorative practices videos, childhood resilience, and we just released a new program on the proactive paraprofessional. So even those staff can go to edleadersnetwork.org and take advantage of that PD. There is a discount for our ELN affiliate states. You can get Ed Leaders Network access for $99 a year if you're a member of the affiliate states. I want to remind Illinois participants that it's free to all public school educators across the state of Illinois. So make sure to get your spreadsheets to us. We look forward to uploading your staff and giving them access to this digital professional learning community at edleadersnetwork.org. Thanks so much, Joe. You want to say goodbye?
All right, everybody. Thanks so much for coming. We appreciate it. Go Crickets.